Good afternoon. Welcome to Welsh Women's Aid's Hustings for the Gwent Police and Crime Commissioners post. My name is Sarah Kirkpatrick and I'm the Chief Executive of Welsh Women's Aid, and thank you all so much for joining me. This evening we have with us Hannah Jarvis from the Conservative Party, Jane Helen Mudd from the Labour Party, and Mike Hamilton from the Liberal Democrats. I'm delighted to have you all with us this evening. I'm going to start by giving each of you 5 minutes to set out your stall. I'm going to go in alphabetical order because that seems fairest. And I'm going to be quite strict on time, so we will keep an eye on the time. And if you reach the 5-minute point, I will interrupt you. I'll let you finish your sentence, but I will interrupt. And then we have a selection of questions which have been sent to us by specialist support services and survivors, and we're going to put those questions to you and give you all the opportunity to respond. So without further ado, I'm going to turn first to Hannah and give you 5 minutes.
Isn't Mike not first if it's alphabetically?
I'm so sorry, I go alphabetical Christian names.
Oh, right, no problem. That's fine with me. Well, hello, thank you for having me. You probably know I'm Hannah, the Conservative candidate, and I'm really pleased to be here tonight. A bit about my background. I'm a single mum of 2. I'm living in Abergavenny at the moment, working as a freelance public relations consultant. But before that, I was civil servant for a decade, and before that, I was in the army. So I've had quite a mixed career, but lots of experiences, which some good, some bad, some ugly, which is why I'm in politics and want to see change. I have a number of things that I'm campaigning on. One of my 6 main points, my 6 pledges, is to do with female safety, sexual misconduct, and confidence in the police, restoring confidence. It's at an all-time low, public confidence in the police, and that is not a good place to be in, and particularly in relation to females. When I've been previously campaigning, not this election, I must say, but previously, I've had people say to me, well, what about male safety? And of course, that's of equal importance, but I believe that it's around 71% of domestic violence where women are the victims. So the problem is greater for females. And as a female myself and mother of a 10-year-old daughter who's starting to see things in the news and pick things up at school, you know, it means a lot to me, and there is change needed, not just in Gwent, throughout the country. You know, Sarah Everard's case brought that home to us, and there are vital lessons to be learnt. I've been looking recently at the Angelini inquiry, which made for pretty damning reading, pretty sobering reading, but you know, let her death not be in vain. Let's learn lessons. Let's recognise the red flags. Let's not allow toxic behaviours to manifest. And that's what I would bring as PCC in terms of female safety. I would want to overhaul discipline within the force completely and implement change, victim-focused change, with victims at their heart. So I don't know how much time I've got left. I think that's probably a nice place to leave it.
Thank you so much. I think I was just about to get a timing warning, so thank you so much. And I will turn to Jane.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for inviting me to take part in this evening. I'm Jane Mudd, and I'm actually at this point in time one of only 4 female local authority leaders in Wales. So I'm the Labour leader of Newport City Council, but I'm also the Welsh Local Government Association spokesperson on community safety, and I'm the co-chair of the Wales Safer Communities Board. So a lot of the work that I do in my current role is very much related to this and to the work of the PCC. And I've got a lot of experience in terms of these roles in bringing people together, certainly having led Newport through the pandemic and the cost of living crisis. I've been in a position where I've been required to make very challenging decisions. And of course, I've got that experience of financial management, managing a £375 million budget, which provides services for around 160,000 people. All of this experience, I think, is really important and would help me in the role as a Police and Crime Commissioner. So I live here in Newport. I'm a wife, mother, grandmother, Newport County AFC devotee, and I always say that is what I do in my spare time. But actually, what I'd really like to share with you is that I've been previously recognised with a PCC award for my partnership work on antisocial behaviour, and I've also been recognised for my participation in bringing the Knife Angel to Newport. And this was really important for all of our partners, because we wanted to really have this fantastic statue here so that people could see the impact, but also it helped underpin a knife amnesty that we held. So a significant impact with our children and with our young people across the whole of Gwent. So my professional background is in housing and regeneration, and I, when I left my last role, I was the head of department at a university in Wales, and what I actually did was oversaw the development and delivery of professional qualifications in housing, health and social care, social work, public protection, and latterly policing. And I think that experience has given me a good understanding of the professional education landscape across the whole of Wales. Now, I know that we all agree that safe and sustainable communities need good policing. And I've pledged to work closely with Gwent Police and our partners and our stakeholders to rebuild that public confidence, because we all agree that public confidence is very low at this time, certainly. And what's important within that is we need to ensure that policing is visible and connected to our communities. And I don't just mean geographic communities by that as well. I mean recognising intersectionality and communities of interest too. So I'd also say that good policing really does demand transparency and accountability. And my commitment is to really ensuring that people's voices are heard, that their concerns are prioritised, and importantly, that our police leaders are held to account. And so I've got 4 key priorities that will enable me to do that if I'm successful and elected to be the PCC. And one of my priorities within that is protecting the vulnerable, tackling violence against women and girls, and also addressing hate crime. And we can only do this if we implement one of my other priorities, which will be around focusing commissioning on early intervention and prevention, making sure that we support initiatives that are aimed at prevention, but also support victims as well. So these are some key pledges that I'm making to the citizens of Gwent, and I hope that they will choose to elect me as the next Police and Crime Commissioner. But for me, the overarching issue here is that it is so important to listen to people. Listening is really important to me, and that's something that's underpinned my leadership. And I want to understand the concerns of our communities across Gwent, our valleys, our rural communities, our towns and our city, because I recognise the diversity there. And I really am committed that if I am successful, I would like to come back to you as well and listen to the voices of your service users and also you as service providers. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And Mike, the floor is yours. Mike, can I ask you to unmute? And Jane, could I ask you to mute? Nope.
If you go up to if you look at the red button that says leave, next to that, you've got a,
We've got it. Thank you so much. Mike, the floor is yours, and we will start the time from now.
Right. Thanks to the Welsh Women's Aid for organising this husting. I got into this election for the most basic of reasons. I saw my local area declining due to the inaction of Gwent Police. Back in 2012, I was the councillor for an inner city ward in Newport. We had 3 hard-working PCSOs, a community policeman, 7 neighbourhood watch schemes, and the OWL internet service which sent out emails warning of local crime. Then the first PCC was elected. We lost the PCSOs, lacking support, all the neighbourhood watch schemes became defunct. Police visibility has got so bad it's a talking point if you see one. The OWL service was replaced by a public relations website for the Police and Crime Commissioner, and they closed the front desk of my local police station. With community policing effectively abandoned, crime has exploded in the ward, mostly drug dealing by bike and scooter. Even the local Labour councillor and Newport City Cabinet member and candidate for the Senedd was jailed for possessing child pornography. So at the start of 2023, I wrote to the Chief Constable with my concerns. She passed me on to 2 of her minions who wrote me 2 condescending replies. One told me crime was going down in the ward, and the other told me of all their successes. I wrote back and told them they were delusional, and not surprisingly, they didn't reply. That's when I got interested in Gwent Police. Frankly, it's a disaster area. In 2023, they had their annual report from the Police Inspectorate, which was so poor, there were calls for the immediate resignation of the PCC and the Chief Constable. When police is so bad, it's difficult to know where to start. The Inspectorate found them failing in investigating crime and protecting vulnerable people. They got the worst possible rating for responding to the public. It is clear they're failing everybody, but especially women and victims. Public protection teams are in crisis over staffing. Rape cases are not always well supervised or conducted by qualified staff. And then it turns out Gwent Police has its own demons. A pervasive canteen culture of misogyny. A revolving door of officers resigning before they can be sacked, plus those jailed, mostly over sexual misconduct. The Chief Constable has had 5 years to clean the stables, but even in the last 12 months, 4 officers were found guilty of gross misconduct and 1 jailed over sexual wrongdoings, and then more shoes to drop, with 2 current and 1 former officer facing gross misconduct over misogynistic, racist and homophobic social media text found on the phone of a deceased police officer. That plus a senior civilian staffer facing gross misconduct over harassing female employees. Enough is enough. Poor Jeff Cubbett thought his job description was to act as a stab-proof vest for the force. Wrong. He was supposed to be our voice, the Gwent public. The force has lost a lot of public support and trust. I think time has come for change, and one thing I'm keen is to commission an independent report into Gwent Police on the lines of Baroness Casey's excellent report into the Met Police. I do not believe the current management of Gwent Police is capable of reforming or improving itself. An independent report on the lines of what Baroness Casey's excellent work and a new Chief Constable recruited from outside the force is what is required. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. I now have a selection of questions, and thank you all for setting out your stores so clearly. And it is my intention to not have the same person coming first every time, so I will turn and direct to who I would like to respond to the questions, if that makes sense. So my first question is, what would be the very first thing you would want to achieve if you were successful in being elected? And I'm going to turn, Mike, I'm going to turn straight to you. Oh, unmute. I'm so sorry.
I've done of these. The first thing I would like to do if I was elected, as I've already said in my open introductions, is to commission an independent report into Gwent Police on the lines of Baroness Casey's excellent report into the Metropolitan Police. I would especially draw anybody's attentions to pages 13 to 15 in her report, which could have been written for Gwent Police. The headings are spectacular. So that's the first thing I would do. The second thing I want to do is basically we will have to recruit a new Chief Constable. And I would like that person to come from outside Gwent Police. And I would like to have them have a background in community policing and in detective work, basically. And that's the first.
Thank you so much. I'm aware that we have further questions, so I'm not going to make too much space to hear your further priorities, because I'm sure that you'll have the opportunity to outline them in a bit. So I'm going to turn to you, Jane, and say, what would be the first thing you would like to achieve if elected?
So if I'm elected, Sarah, the first thing I'll do is to swear the oath of impartiality. And I'd really like to mention this because it's really important to me, because that is a reflection of a clear commitment to serving all of the citizens of Gwent, irrespective of whether they voted to me or not. So my first action would be that. And I think after that, it would be important to get to work. And for me, that would be developing my new police and crime plan, which really needs to be informed by people's lived experience. I'm really clear that as part of this, as I've already said, I want to ensure that one of my priorities includes protecting the vulnerable and tackling violence against women and girls. And included within this, I will be really clear that this is about setting out expectations around stalking and harassment, and requiring actions to tackle misogyny and hate crime. And I think we're all aware of the issues that Gwent Police have faced around that. But what I'd like to emphasise, Sarah, is that what's really important in developing my police and crime plan is that it's really focused around the principles of co-production, working with victims and survivors to ensure that their lived experience actually inform not only my expectations of Gwent Police, but the actions of Gwent Police going forwards.
Thank you so much. And Hannah?
Well, the first thing I'd like to achieve, which is different to the first thing I'd do, because obviously, yes, swear the oath, and I'd want to look at the budgets to ensure that I have the means to achieve what I want to do. The first thing I would want to achieve is a complete overhauling of discipline, because there's nothing more important than confidence in the police. And at the moment, I feel that's lost. Gwent is, I'm not here to criticise anyone and what's gone on, but there are problems. Gwent is not the worst police force in the country, but the force is there to serve. And if the public do not feel that they can call on the police because they don't have faith in them, then that's a very dangerous position to be in. So the first thing I would want to do is review discipline to root out toxic behaviours from the moment they begin. An absolute zero tolerance policy within the hierarchy, but amongst the rank and file as well, in order to restore that confidence. And that would be my first aim.
Thank you so much. I'm very conscious that I've worked with colleagues quite carefully in order to ensure that it's not just my voice that's heard. And based on your comments, I'm going to turn to my colleague Steph, because I think it follows on very much from the points that all of you are making. So I'm going to turn to Steph and say, could you ask, out of sequence, but could you ask the next question, please?
Thank you. Hi, I'm Stephanie, Head of Public Affairs and Communications at Welsh Women's Aid. A few of you have kind of mentioned it already, which we really appreciate, and I just kind of want to draw out some more specific actions on this. So we know that survivors' trust in the police, not just Gwent, kind of across kind of the UK and Wales, is dwindling, and with increasing reports of police perpetrated abuse, and the Centre for Women's Justice super complaint on police perpetrated abuse. Do you have any thoughts specifically on how to tackle police perpetrated abuse?
Jane.
Thanks. I think this is wrapped up in how we improve practice more generally, isn't it, amongst the police? Certainly for me, it would be. And when we talk about police perpetrated abuse, something I'd like to highlight within that is how we respond and how we provide safe spaces and safe reporting mechanisms for police perpetrated abuse, particularly in domestic situations where both parties may actually be members of the police force. So if you are both members of the police force and one of you is experiencing that and it's perpetrated by the other, you really will need confidence that there is a safe reporting mechanism for you. And we've seen a lot of reports, haven't we, where it's been reported that people have been accessing records that they shouldn't have and sharing information that they shouldn't have shared. So for me, within that, there is a group of people that we need to be mindful of, and they are those people that will be in those relationships where they're both linked to the force, and we need to make sure that they're safe as well. But I think one other aspect of that, when we think about police perpetrated abuse and just attitudes and behaviours, is really how we need to make that cultural shift and that cultural change. And I recently visited USW Newport, and this is something that I would like to take up with the Chief Constable and take forwards. They've got something called the Hydro Innovation and Research Centre there. And what that does is it enables police officers and other public service professionals to work on real-time scenarios to develop, I suppose, develop their decision-making skills. But within that, understand the potential consequences of their actions. And for me, it's tools like this where you bring people together and they're engaged in that experiential learning. That's, for me, that's part of the culture change, where people can actually understand what the impact of their actions will be. And I think at this time, when there's such a high level of public concern about culture and standards, and not just in the police, I will add, across the public sector, it's tools like this and research centres like this that can really help guide us in terms of the change that we'd like to make. And also within this, I'd say there really needs to be further liaison and engagement around professional development, engagement with specialists. And once again, and this will be a point that I make no excuse for coming back to, it's also really important that the police hear the voices of those with lived experience. They have to know what the consequences and what the impacts of behaviour like this can be. Now, as employers, we need to ensure that all of our employees have got confidence in calling this out right across the public sector. And I'd just like to go back to that really important point about we need, whilst it may only be a small number of people, we need to make sure that specialist referral mechanism is in place for those people that might be in relationships with each other, where they're both part of the police force, but the perpetrator, the person who's the victim, needs to be able to report that safely and have confidence in that.
Thank you so much. And I'm sorry to interrupt, but it felt like an important point to end on. Hannah, I'm going to turn to you and give you the floor.
I'm ever sorry, Stephanie, you cut out at my end the second half of the question. Would you mind just saying it, but repeating it?
Yeah, that's okay. I'll pop it in the chat as well if that helps. So basically it's how are you going to tackle police perpetrated abuse?
Okay, that's brilliant. Thank you. I mean, I agree with Jane. It's going to take an entire change in culture, and as I said earlier, things permeate down from the top. So the message coming from the hierarchy needs to be clear, needs to be zero tolerance. But also, you know, we need to have more training in the rank and file. We need to have clear whistle-blowing policies in place. Excuse me. The recent case with Ricky Jones highlighted the issues with fear of coming forward from his own family, and that was a very difficult situation. And it needs, people need to have confidence that they can report in safety, in confidence, and that they will be taken seriously, and that things will not be leaked within the force. They will be dealt with by people not connected to the case, so there's absolute impartiality. It's quite a big task. It's not going to happen overnight. People need to change their views, but it comes, you know, the smallest things, and this is not about woke behaviours, but the smallest things, inappropriate jokes, they can be ignored, but they can often manifest into something a lot worse. And so, you know, professionalism is key. And I want people to feel comfortable that if they hear something that they think is inappropriate, they are safe and happy, that when they report, it is the investigation is conducted in a safe way, professional way, impartial way, with tight timings on the investigation. You know, they cannot be allowed to be dragged out either, as has happened. And, you know, obviously there were complications with COVID, but that is not in victims' interests when things are protracted and drawn out. So we need to have clear lines about investigations as well, and they need to conclude swiftly, and the action taken needs to be really robust, more robust than it has been.
Jane, Hannah, I'm so sorry, I'm looking at the wrong bit of my... Hannah, thank you so much. And Mike, I could see you nodding, I'm turning to you. Can I remind you to unmute?
Right, this is what I call the Wayne Couzens question. It's basically, could Wayne Couzens happen here? And the answer is yes, probably. And if you study what he did, and you study the first part of the report into his behaviour, it is very clear the police had numerous opportunities to pick him up, and all the red flags they missed. The vetting and the monitoring was totally superficial. He was one of the boys, and they basically gave him a clean pass. There was a major study by the Police Inspectorate in 2022 into vetting, and they found in an alarming number of cases, and I think they looked at 700 vetting files, they disagreed with the vetting decision made by many of the forces. Often forces will not take up references. The kind of vetting they were doing prior to employing some of these constables is even less than many big firms would do in a normal employment round. It was appalling. You only have to look at some of the cases within Gwent Police, and I've basically looked at all of them. The case of PC Clark Jocelyn is a very good example. This is somebody who was a very predatory PC, who was in a position in his training area to basically form relationships with young female PCs. Concerns about his behaviour were raised as early as 2012. Gwent Police's response was to ask one of his mates to have a friendly word with him. He was finally dismissed in 2019. Apparently his behaviour was well known within Gwent Police, but none of that raised a red flag. 2 female PCs sued the force and won damages. His case is remarkably similar to PC Nathan Collins in 2023, only he was jailed. Time and time, the Gwent Police have failed. If the procedures recommended by the Police Inspectorate and College of Policing are followed, many would-be recruits would be turned away, and most bad officers would be uncovered. When police claim they're now following best practice, but the scandals don't stop. As I say, there's been 5 officers either found guilty of gross misconduct or jailed in the last 12 months. There was a media report in 2022 reporting Gwent officers under investigation for domestic abuse. This is why I think it's no good tightening up things. We need a root and branch independent investigation of the culture that underlies Gwent Police. And that's why my #1 priority is to get that independent investigation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you all for your comments on police perpetrated abuse. I'm going to talk about Wales for a moment. So here in Wales, we take a whole systems approach. We talk about tackling violence against women, domestic abuse and sexual violence. And I'm sure that many of you will have heard other politicians, possibly your peers, talking about taking a whole systems approach. And I was wondering if each of you would tell me, what does a whole systems approach mean to you? And Mike, I'm actually going to turn back to you first. So straight back on, sir.
Right. When this term was flagged up for me, I will admit I had to go away and look it up. I had to do an internet search to find out what a whole systems approach meant. And the answer is it means almost something different to almost every organisation that uses the term. I think what they're talking about is what we used to call joined up thinking or an holistic approach. Basically, thinking everything together. And of course we need joined up thinking in every aspect of police work. Catching offenders, supporting victims, rehabilitating offenders, discouraging crime and safeguarding the public are all part of the process. Improve part and you improve the rest. The holistic approach should also involve working with partners. Curious, the one thing never mentioned in this election so far is mental health. And clearly, if there's one area that needs joined up thinking, it's mental health. Superficially, specifically for women, we need the process to be seamless, from 999 call to victim support. Any breakdown in the process and we risk losing the support of the victim, not to mention the trust of the public. The 2023 Inspector report identifies shortfalls in this area, often communications with the victim, and my priority was to get those solved. The Inspector was especially concerned over the failure to apply protective orders in domestic abuse cases. While the police force increased the number of domestic violence protection notices, i.e. protection 48 hours, they weren't converting enough of these to domestic violence protection orders, which provide protection for 28 days. And they were not using the stalking protection orders anything like enough in the appropriate cases. As part of that whole systems approach, we need to root out systems in their own ranks, which is damaging the victims and the public trust. Curiously for me, the only use of the term on the Gwent Police website is the Women's Pathfinder Whole Systems Approach, which is an interesting little scheme designed to wean female offenders away from crime and is largely about providing support and dealing with issues like drug and alcohol abuse. I would be interested to find out more about this scheme, for a couple of the providers do cause me concern. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. And Jane, I'm going to turn to you. What does a whole systems approach mean to you?
Well, for me, I'd like to contextualise this and talk about what a whole systems approach means within the context of Gwent, because the 5 local authorities in Gwent have committed to working together with our statutory partners to form a Gwent Public Service Board. And that this is different to other areas. So the 5 of us have come together on this footprint to do this with our other partners. And this includes the PCC, Gwent Police and Probation. And we're working together to develop a whole systems approach. And I'm sure that people on the call will be may have an awareness of this, but as part of this, we've made a commitment to become a Marmot region. So essentially what we're doing is developing a public health based approach here in Gwent to some of these issues, and I want to highlight how we're addressing that around violence and domestic abuse, because in 2021-22 here in Gwent we had the highest recorded domestic abuse rate across all police force areas in England and Wales, and that in itself is a really stark statistic. Now we need to dig a little bit deeper. Is that because reporting is higher, or is there a higher incidence of cases? We need to get beneath that, don't we, and look at the evidence. But actually in my own local authority, we're hosting a pilot programme working with partners on developing a systems-based approach to addressing violence and domestic abuse. And this really does mean looking at end-to-end service provision so that we can work together to understand this from the perspective of service users and ensure that when we're commissioning services, we can commission those services in a sustainable and efficient way to actually meet those needs. So for me, my understanding of a whole systems approach is what we collectively aspire to achieve here in Gwent, collaborating and working together on what I personally would describe as a public health based approach, which really does also support the development of early intervention and prevention services as well within that. So that's my understanding of a whole systems approach, and I realise that that might have been a bit of a long answer, but I think the pilot is really important because that will help us to improve service delivery and critically deliver better outcomes for our service users. And we will be able to share the learning from that across the whole of Wales.
Thank you, Jane. And Hannah.
I think to me it means collaboration, and that's absolutely critical. Working with partners in health, third sector and charities, but above all victims. Whatever we do must be victim-led. And I think that's what's been missing over the last couple of years, and what we need to re-implement. So yes, there are issues that will need tackling specifically within the police force, but there is a lot of collaboration that can be done with other police forces, with other PCCs. I forget the name of the Deputy Chief Constable who leads on violence against women and girls, but I'd be looking to take a lead from her. So I think the key word there for me is collaboration, listening, but victim-led at the heart of it.
Thank you so much, and thank you all. I'm again really important to me to hear your voices, so thank you all for elaborating on each point. I'm going to turn to a colleague. You don't need to hear me over and over again. So I'm going to turn to my colleague Jen, who has a question, if that's all right. Jen is looking at me.
Hi everyone, I'm slightly worried that my internet wasn't working.
It's fine.
Just wanted to say a quick thank you to everyone for being here. So I'm Jen, I'm the policy officer at Welsh Women's Aid. So the Welsh Government has committed to the Anti-Racist Wales Action Plan, the LGBTQ plus action plan, and they've set up the Disability Rights Task Force. We know that someone's lived experience and their identity can impact the way that they live life in Wales. With that in mind, what will you do to ensure that policing takes an intersectional approach to support survivors in Wales?
Hannah.
Hi, thank you. I think with this issue, I think education and awareness is really important. For me, excuse me, that is as important as punishment. They're both of equal importance, but education and deterring our young people from taking the wrong path in life is critical. So I am all for schemes like the Heathley Bark, the police cadets. As part of my pledges, I have committed to looking at covering the funding for the Beat Cymru, where police officers go into schools and engage with pupils and educate them about various issues. And I think it was a fantastic scheme, and a real shame that the Welsh Government have ended funding for it. But with something like that, again, I think it's early intervention is critical, and I would be looking to invest in schemes, in charities, and other groups that deter people from those sort of lifestyle choices and educate them to the consequences of their actions.
Thank you so much, Hannah. And thank you also, Jen, for popping the question in the chat, because I think sometimes when it's helpful for people to refresh themselves. Mike, can I turn to you on this one?
I had to look this word up as well, and I thought archaeologists, especially Americans and those from Cambridge, were bad at coming up with jargon. In this context, I understand the term to mean where aspects of identity intersect or overlap, e.g. race, class, gender identity, sexual orientation, faith or disability, so that prejudices and discriminations converge and become multiplied. I suppose I start the answer by saying that we should treat all hate crimes with the seriousness that they deserve. This includes racism, discrimination of LGBT+, discrimination of disabled, mentally ill, misogyny, and any discrimination by race and creed. Clearly, one answer to this is the police need to widen their recruitment. It does not cure all ills, but it makes communities feel more included and enables the police to see the world from different viewpoints. Forming links with groups and organisations and sitting down and listening to them would help. When people actually start in, it's surprisingly easy how it is to see the world from their point of view. I'm surprised how bad Gwent Police is at reaching out. I've met some groups during my campaign who, I think largely because of lack of contact, have developed a very negative view of Gwent Police. I would want the person running neighbourhood team, one of the neighbourhood teams, to meet communities on his or her patch. I would want senior officers to be available to meet Gwent-wide organisations. And I think somebody said earlier, the fundamental issue to solving much of this is to listen and to talk. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. And Jane.
Thank you. I think my starting point really would, in terms of taking an intersectional approach, would be really to place an emphasis on person-centred services, which recognises all protected characteristics when I'm developing my police and crime plan. And my police and crime plan will have equality, diversity and inclusion as the golden thread which connects it throughout. And I think reflecting on this, I will be able to bring some experience to this, certainly through my work with the WLGA, that will help inform this. I've been a spokesperson for social justice for the whole of local government in Wales, and I've represented local government on a range of equalities issues. And certainly these experiences do help to inform my position on this. And I really hope that my experience within that will demonstrate is that I do have an understanding of intersectionality and how we can recognise that. And I'll certainly be incorporating this into my police and crime plan, both in relation to policing priorities and also in relation to supporting survivors.
Thank you, Jane. I'm going to turn to my colleague Jade now, who is going to offer a question to each of you.
Thank you. I'm Jade. I work in our services and survivor engagement team at Welsh Women's Aid. And my question is, how would you plan to use survivors' voices in any strategic direction or priorities you would set if you were elected into the role?
And I'm going to turn to Jane first.
One of my priorities, if I was successful, would be, as I said at the beginning, would be to come back out to organisations such as Welsh Women's Aid and really commit to engaging with you further, because it's really important that we don't, when we're looking at building our plans and developing our strategies, we're not just looking at statistical evidence, but we're also really incorporating that lived experience. And I would hope that through engaging with you as an organisation and other agencies that we would work with in terms of commissioning our support services, that survivors and victims would agree to meet with me and to discuss with me personally issues that they may have with this, so that I can begin to develop that better understanding, because I recognise that as an individual I won't have that full and complete understanding, but there is no substitute for trying to work through that by starting to understand lived experience. And so I would certainly be coming back to you and organisations such as Welsh Women's Aid to seek your advice and guidance in engaging with people to absolutely ensure that when strategies and plans are developed, those voices are heard. And I think for me, that's not just about one-off engagement, that is about coming back. My commitment is about amplifying people's voices, and I want to make sure that these voices are heard. That's why I came into politics. That's what I do now. That's part of who I am, and for me that would be very much part of what I'd want to achieve in this role.
Thank you, Jane. Hannah.
Well, I think first of all, it's interesting. This is the second time I've stood for Police and Crime Commissioner, and they've been two very different elections. And this time, I can honestly say I've had far more correspondence from the people of Gwent than I did the first time. And I'd say between 70 and 80% of that has been about the mistreatment of victims of crime. In particular females, and you know, the incidents that have happened in Gwent, which has, you know, really been quite striking. So I'm already having lots of conversations with individuals and various charities and organisations, and I think it takes more than just saying, oh, I'll listen, I'll be open, I'll have yes, open door policy. We really need to mean it. We really need to work these views and these ideas, because no one has better ideas than victims who've been through the experiences. They really do. They are the best placed people to say how these situations should be handled in future. So it's not just saying I'll have meetings with them, they can come to me, I'll listen. It's about proactively going out and seeking these opinions and seeking meetings and real collaboration with survivors, and I fully intend to do that. I've already got a list of people who, if I'm elected, I'll have meetings with. I'm good to go, and you know, I would be true to my word and approach these people and work their views into my police and crime plan.
Thank you, Hannah. And Mike?
As I've already said, one of the first steps I would do would be to commission an independent report into Gwent Police to get to the bottom of culture within the force. That report would be modelled upon Baroness Casey's report into the Metropolitan Police, and in that she takes a lot of attention of victims and ordinary citizens and to get their point of view. And I think it's crucial to have that level of independent investigation of what people in Gwent, victims and non-victims, think of the police and their feelings about it. I also have a few oddball kind of variations on this. I mean, one of the things I was looking at was the training schemes that Gwent police officers do. And one quite good scheme they do is called the Safe Life Domestic Abuse Matters course. And to me, it seems an excellent course. But the thing that struck me straight away is it lasts one day. One day. I mean, surely there must be space within the training of Gwent Police to have a much more larger encompassing course that involves the voices of the victims. So actually tell police officers, those that willing to, exactly what the victims' point of view in these areas are, and actually get a genuine discourse going between police officers and victims. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. I'm going to come to my final question. I'm going to be quite strict on time, but at the same time, this feels like an important question to give you all the space to answer. So I will alert you to ensure that everyone gets enough time to speak on this particular subject. So since the Domestic Abuse Act 2021, children that have been exposed to domestic abuse are recognised as victims in their own right rather than just witnesses. And bearing in mind the comments that all of you have made about engaging with survivors and hearing the voice of, and also recognising that sometimes children are not in a position to share their voice, I'm going to ask each of you, how will you ensure that children and understanding the needs of children as victims of domestic abuse remains at the heart of policing, and that children will get the support they need? And I'm going to turn first to Hannah.
Oh, thank you for putting it in the chat. Yeah, I am guilty of going off at a tangent and forgetting what I'm talking about sometimes. Yeah, it's a very difficult one. And as a mother, again, you know, it's something that rings true. It was a very good thing that this was included in the Act in 21, but it's a very fine balance between extracting the information you need from children in terms of prosecution and not damaging them. We need more specialist officers in the force, without a doubt, and I'd even go as far as say as those officers need more training than they have at the moment. It's a very, very niche role, and whilst you know our officers are very adaptable and agile and can generally turn their hands to any situation, this is something that you can't fudge it. You know, it has to be right. There can be no margin for error when you were talking about children. So I've got to say, this is not something I have considered, but I'm glad you raised it because I need to think about it. It's a really serious, important issue. So rather than make something up, I think I will go away and and look into this and have a long, hard think about how I would deal with it, because it's really important. You know, it's certainly it's something that needs real consideration and investment. So I certainly would want to, you know, when I'm looking at my budgets, probably allocate some more money into that area in terms of training and perhaps recruiting specialist officers. But that's probably all I can say for now without making it up. But it's something I will go away and think about really hard.
Hannah, thank you so much. Mike?
Clearly, protecting children is the key aim of any police force. And I read with mounting alarm the 2023 Inspectorate report, which raised a whole series of areas where Gwent Police seems to be falling down on this. At some point they quote, and this is a direct quote from the report, staffing in public protection units is low enough to be regarded as critical. And that's one of the crucial organisations that we need within Gwent Police to work with children. The report goes on to list a whole series of areas where child victims have been let down. There's a thing about that they're not. They're supposed to investigate the background of children and vulnerable adults, and to see whether they need further work, and this work often isn't done or it's delayed. I know that Gwent Police work with a range of different bodies in this area, the Welsh NHS, local authorities, a range of statutory bodies and volunteer organisations, and they all work together in the multi-agency risk assessment conference. But again, reading the inspector's report, there's an awful lot of areas where they say things aren't being done very well. There's a question about staffing, so that this multi-agency conference isn't always getting the net level of information it should be getting on issues that affect children. And again, I think we need to, I would seriously look at putting more funding into this area and trying to avoid these problems. I could go into a whole raft of other areas that involve children. And in particular, Gwent Police seems to be falling down a bit on missing children, especially assessing the seriousness of the cases. And even when the children return, they need to be checking why they left home. And
Thank you, Mike. I'm so sorry. Thank you for answering the question. I did say I was going to be strict on time, and so because you said I was going to add, you were going to add things. I think I'm fairly cutting you off at that point. Jane, I'm going to turn to you.
Thank you, Sarah. And the first thing that I'd say is it's absolutely fitting that the legislation does recognise this. It's really important because we've got a much better understanding now of adverse childhood experiences and how they can impact on outcomes later in life. But you know, 50% of our child protection cases across the region also have a history of domestic abuse. This is a real issue here. And we need to really take this understanding. And I would say this is why it's so important that we take a public health-based approach to this, develop a whole systems approach to addressing some of the challenges around this. And for me, there is something also in this. It's not just about the policing of this, it's also about how we commission services around this, how we work on early intervention and prevention, and we support initiatives that really aimed at supporting these children. And I'm particularly interested in how we can work more closely with family intervention services on this. But I do want to highlight, and I think this is really important, there's actually some good work that's been undertaken here in Gwent. The PCC and Gwent Police have worked together with children and young people to develop policing strategies for children and young people. And these are really effective. But what's key to this is that they are continuously monitored, so that we can monitor their effectiveness on an ongoing basis and ensure that the experiences of those children and young people are recorded. And I'd also like to add, and this goes back to a point that Hannah's made earlier as well, that when we're thinking about this and we're thinking about this whole system approach, actually, I agree as well that it's really important that we maintain the offer of a policing relationship with our schools as well, because it's really important in those safe spaces that children and young people are able to engage with the police too. But I would reject the notion that that there isn't support and care for children and young people within Gwent, because there is, but we need to do more.
Thank you, Jane. Thank you all. I'm conscious that we have only 3 minutes left. I think that all of your remarks have been incredibly powerful. For me, it's really heartening that each of you has taken the time, and we're really sorry that Donna Cushing wasn't able to join us. She did give us her apologies in advance, but really grateful for all of you for sharing your thoughts. This will be available on YouTube. You are speaking directly to the people who are going to be voting, and I am sure that your comments will be really helpful to everyone. So thank you so much for your time. Very best of luck with the election, and I look forward to